Welcome everybody. My name is Jeff Fowler with the Apartment Owners Association of California. It is great to have you with us today. And mold can be a serious, serious problem for people, and there's tremendous liability that goes with it, and it can be a real beast to remediate. And there's a lot of things that you think might be, you could get rid of it with, like bleach and things like that, but yet no, actually those things don't work. So you're going to hear from a professional today, and you're going to stay out of trouble. And that's half of it, is staying out of trouble, and the other half is knowing what you need to know to maximize your investments. That's what AOA is all about, is giving you the information that you need so that you can be a successful housing provider. And so here we are. And if you're not an AOA member, really suggest that you join. We invite you to join, and our prices will be going up soon, so definitely hook into that. And one of the things that we do, a lot of people join for the forums, and for 2022, we've had a new form. It's new, but it's been up there since even before the new year. There's a new mold booklet. So if you happen to miss other live streams, other communications that we've had, we've talked about it on the live stream. We've talked about it in the magazine. And so definitely trying to keep everybody in the know. So check your email always, and we'll keep you updated. But yeah, there's a new mold booklet. If you have the old one, throw it away. Use the new one for sure. And also want to mention that there's a money-back guarantee in your first year with us. So definitely there's no risk in joining. And if you're wanting the closed captions, you can find that on Facebook. And then of course on YouTube after the whole presentation is done. So catch it live on Facebook now, and definitely subscribe to the newsletter that we have. You can go to the website at aoausa.com, and if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, there's a place for you to put in your name and also your zip code. And based on what's happening, you'll get emails. And just like this last week, we sent out to LA County an email with a survey. And literally, it brought me to tears to see how many people have been impacted by the eviction moratorium in LA County. And so if you're not LA City, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, some of the places that have specific other eviction moratoriums, people anyway, they responded, and man, we've had so many, and we are planning a lawsuit. Big news about that will drop next week. So if you haven't done the survey, check your email and get that survey in if you're LA County. And also there's just a lot going on. San Francisco has some crazy laws where they're, so I'll do another short live stream about that real soon here. And it's just time where we all need to really be aware of what's going on and take action the best that we can. Next week, we have a live stream about how to beat the capital gains if you're going to be selling your property, and whether you're cashing out or whether you're going for bigger and better. Either way, you want to avoid those capital gains tax, and so we'll have somebody that will help you, give you a strategy to do that. There's a blue help button. If you're on the aoausa.com website, there's a blue help button at the bottom, and if you can put your questions in there for this live stream or any other live stream that's live, and we'll be able to get that question answered for you, hopefully. And so this event today is sponsored by PRC Restoration, and they have been in business for 20 years. Commercial and residential disaster recovery is their business. So water, fire, mold, sewage, cleaning, septic, pumping, they do it all, and they've even done the COVID cleanups, and maybe some of that is phased out now, but yeah, so they are there for you. And our speaker today works there. He's the marketing director. He has multiple certifications in all of this with hazardous waste and asbestos, COVID cleanup, all these different things. It's my pleasure to introduce to you today Freddy Rodriguez.
Hey, Jeff, thank you very much for the introduction. I appreciate that. And good morning to everybody. Um, I think it's a great topic we're going to be talking about today, something that has been a little bit, I believe, somewhat ignored. But I'm very passionate to talk about this. There's a lot of information I will be giving out. But my biggest thing today that I want to everybody to know is how to deal with certain things, how to work with mold. The word mold, everybody gets scared and panic about it right now or nowadays, but it's something that my goal today is how can you handle that in your own property. So with that said, appreciate it. My name is Freddy and I'm the marketing director for PRC Restoration. And we'll start a little bit because we're just gonna go right through it. A couple of things that we really want to look into, and I'm gonna go starting with the things that we need to make where these things come from. What is it? A little disclaimer here. All information I'm going to present to you today, it actually comes from the EPA, CDC, and also the ISCRC information. So you can always go out to those pages, look for that information, but I'm going to summarize a lot of it into the presentation today. So again, just please note that all the documents they come from the EPA itself and a couple of things. But biggest deal, what I want to talk to you guys about today is the regulations and the guidelines and standards. We want to make sure clear, we get this question a lot, is there a regulation? Is there something going on? Is there something that it's the government or any agency is regulates on? And the answer is no. There's no current federal regulations on mold or even licensing on the United States. In Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, those are the big countries that they don't have anything. But however, there's individual states that have elected regulations on this. So I wanna go over a little bit of this because we have in California have grabbed some of those regulations and brought them into our workplace. But overall, for the 10 years, there's really some states that have some regulations on it that they implemented. So number one, Texas is one of the states that have in May 2004, the effective day, they start having the rules and licensing on it, as well as Florida. Those are the biggest states that they do have regulation on it. California has not implemented one. There's one already up into actually presented, but it hasn't passed. So, and what that is that they want to make sure that they set up some kind of standards when it comes to California, but again, it hasn't been. Maryland, there has one since 2010. Louisiana has none. They don't have anything there, so I want to go through it. New York, actually, department is from 2016. They established a licensing requirement for inspectors, for remediators and trainers, and any minimal work that actually has standards on it. So New Hampshire has also set some regulations on it. I'm going to go briefly on it on these ones. Maine has none, but they actually prohibit the entity from providing both mold assessments and remediation services unless the building owner has signed a disclosure statement. Again, owners, this is important to kind of go and read what's out there. New Jersey, their standards of indoor environment certification and licensed indoor environmental consultants, trying to work a lot of new laws. AOA is really good at bringing up the new laws, new regulations, almost as they come out. But every year there's something new going on. So just want to make sure that I establish that I'll go back a little bit. That again, in California, there's really no regulations or being established as far as up to now. But there is a lot of other rules and regulations that does have to be taken care of, and we do have to look into it, making sure that we cover that. And I'll go through it through the whole slides, and we'll let you know why the reasons are. So here it goes. The 5 kingdoms of the living organisms and mold. I'm going to dive into mold, a little bit of the science behind it. Mold, it is in the living organism. A mold is something that is alive, something that is there. It's not going to go away. Can't kill it, but it's a living organism, and it falls under the fungi. The living organism kingdom is under the fungi. So there is also studies on it as well. So there's when it comes out to biology, right? They study the living things, microbiology, any small little things. Mycology, the study of mold. So again, there is such a big deal when it comes to mold that we neglect it, we see it, but I want to make sure that we all understand that there is studies on mold, and there is also part of our five kingdoms as living organisms. Um, Here's one of the things why it's bioaerosols, right? Why is mold such a big deal? Well, this is the deal. They're ambiguous in the nature. They prevent anything indoors and outdoors, and the size ranges from zero point 0.1 to 100 microns. They're very tiny, very small. Just the same thing as the skin cells, the toxins and particles, any waste products, allergens, cat hair, right? Saliva. All these are little things that I want to bring out that is part of all the as it goes along with the mold side. Microorganisms, the fungi, which is the mold and yeast, the bacteria, viruses, all these are very tiny organisms that we can't really see with the naked eye, but they're there. Okay, so as a colonizers, this is something I want to bring it up to you. There's different levels of how they grow. Okay, they grow in different levels, and I'm gonna go pretty much with the number one level. This is the fastest growing mold and requires less water activity, and I'm going to go with the 80% relative humidity. This mold type grows pretty fast. And then the second, and I'll give you some examples of who they are. In the second level, they require more activity. Okay, so as a restorer, when we go to a place, we look for these three levels of mold. And depending on, obviously, the growth, the colors, we can determine how long have they been there. And it goes up by the water activity. The third level is the slowest growing mold and requires more water activity. So that's more than 90% relative humidity. It almost has to be pretty soaking wet. We fall out of the water damage, and this is where one of the things that we look into. Again, the relative humidity and humidity is what we look for. As far as the conditions, this is what we look as well for the conditions as a restorer. Okay, so condition one is the normal fungal ecology, and that means that there's mold in the air right now, everywhere. It's just present. It doesn't go anywhere, but it's a normal range. Okay, so the indoor environment that may have settle spores for anything that it goes to as a location or the quantity reflected on some normal ecology. Condition two is settle spores. This is where the environment primarily is contaminated slightly with settle spores that were probably dispersed from a place to, let's say, for example, if it has a couch, and all these just you move the couch or you move a curtain with a lot of mold, and normally they settle somewhere else, and that's kind of the condition two where we look into. And then the condition three is where the mold is growing. This is where you see in the drywall. This is where you see inside the closets, clothing, and this is the environment where the actual mold is growing and is present. And not necessarily could be growing, but it can also be dormant and is there. So condition three is the one we always look for as a restorer, and you and your property look for these places. Definitely bathrooms, kitchens, anywhere where there's water. Look for that actual growth. For if it's growing actually now, is it active, or it grew in the past. So condition number three is what we want to focus on. There's a video I was actually gonna show, but you can always we'll put it in the description. You can watch it, and how mold actually grows. It's very interesting. It's fascinating to see these living organisms growing. But then we go into how does this happen? How do mold grows? There's a few factors necessary to it. Obviously, there's had to be presence of mold spores, which we know they're everywhere. The nutrients, something they need to eat off, something they need to feed themselves from, which number one in homes is drywall, and the backing of it, the board, the brown board, that is just it's almost a dessert for mold to grow. So that's number one place that they'll start growing. They need water source. They need water. So in order for them for mold to grow or expand, there has to be a water source. Time and environment conditions also a big deal, and oxygen, which oxygen's obviously we're definitely is everywhere. But the biggest deal is this: is if there is no water, there will be no mold. Okay, so again, the best way to prevent any kind of mold is keeping everything dry, and if it gets wet, dry it quickly. This is where we fail, just in general. Even personally myself, we get out of the shower, and sometimes we close the door, we leave it in there. This is notorious for those that own apartments. I think that's the number one place that we've dealt with is the moisture and mold in the bathrooms, because there's a closed environment, but the water still remains there. Here's why you have to prevent why we have to prevent the water damage. Make sure you always check for the common moisture problems that we find. Always floods, obviously leaks, plumbing problems, appliances. This goes with refrigerators, dishwashers, any hose leaking, obviously HVAC systems as well. Shower doors and bathrooms. Again, this is very most of the biggest problems that we find the water and problems. But there's also the construction design, windows that are leaking. Roof is number one, especially when in California it rains very minimal. But when it rains, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we get a lot of calls for mold inspections, because obviously we find out the roofs were leaking. Below grade walls, this is when we having issues. On bedrooms, sometimes there's a planter behind it, and just a lot of moisture has been there, it's trapped. Water going into the property itself. Okay, there's cracks or anything. The structures of the walls are poorly built or sealed. Sometimes they don't seal them correctly, so when it rains, it goes into the property. And the raised bed planters, for those that have apartments, we've seen that a lot, that they have raised planters, but then the water is still when they water the planter, it goes into the property. So this is things that you want to look into. Definitely is a best way to start your inspections. If you do have, there's some guidance I'm going to give you if there is a water intrusion in your property. So if it's clean water, okay, you got between 24 and 48 hours to prevent mold growth. Okay, these are some things I'm going to give you. So books and papers, anything that goes books and papers that are wet, you want to discard those right away. Again, those are notorious for mold to just settle in there and start growing. So books and papers, obviously if they're not valuable, if not, you can just obviously, there's companies that restore valuable books and all that, but if not, they just get rid of them. That's the best way to prevent mold. Ceiling tiles, those are also, you have to just discard and replace them. There's really can fix, but it prevent the mold growth. The carpet and the backing, for those that apartments or homes that have some carpet, they have to be dry within 24 to 48 hours. This time, which is the second day, so if there's anything that happened within that carpet, you want to dry. Don't let it sit there. So you have to remove the water, extract the water from the carpet, and obviously reduce the levels of humidity, and you have to accelerate with putting fans on it. You don't want to let that the carpet sit too long. Another thing that it has to be taken care of right away when there's a water intrusion is your wall insulation. It definitely holds water, so it's inside the wall. We recommend that it needs to be discarded and replaced. On the concrete side, not so much a problem, but you definitely want to remove as much water as you can, and definitely to set some dehumidifiers, some fans, even heaters when it comes to concrete, so you can get the moisture out. And the fiberglass, same way, you just have to get rid of that one. So this is tips to prevent mold growth. Okay, I just want to bring that up. Wallboard, the drywall. Okay, so make sure that is if it can be dry in place. Again, you got 24 to 48 hours to dry it. It also kind of hurts the integrity of the drywall if it gets wet. So make sure that you get to remove that, discard it, or replace, or just dry within 24 to 48 hours. Window drapes, these ones are pretty easy. You can still clean them. Dry clean, make sure they're dry. And wood surfaces, this is something that we don't consider it, but when a wall gets wet, the wood inside remains wet. So that's something that we need to dry. So you have to remove that moisture immediately. If it sits there for too long, possibly mold could grow in there. So fans, anything can be treated, any heat, dehumidifiers, and that's for the wood itself. Um, these are definitely tips that for making sure that you look into for preventing mold growth. Okay, so it is important to dry that water damage within 24 to 48 hours to prevent the growth. Another thing that I want to bring this that most insurance companies do not provide a coverage for mold remediation, but they do provide for water damage. So take advantage of that as far as taking care of the problem immediately. And again, you got 24 or 48 hours. As a restorers, we recommend to be dry as soon as possible. And that'll prevent a lot of other issues on it. Here's a couple of images of mold. You see there was a roof leak. You can see the ceiling, but this was let too long, too long. We'll know that definitely that is. On one topic that we wanted to touch bases as well, there's questions that we get arise a lot is what's the this is mildew, it's not an issue, or what's the difference between mold and mildew? There's a couple of misperceptions on mildew on itself, and it's taken a little slightly, a little less with prevention, but they're both mold and mildew. They're both types of fungi. So, and these are the most common found in a home. Okay, so they're both fungi. They both come from from the same kingdom, but the difference between them, okay, the difference between both is the way they grow. So, mold usually grows on food. If you leave bread or anything outside, cheese, you'll see mold growing automatically in food. And inside structures, okay, such as the walls or crawl spaces. So mold is found on the damp surfaces, not necessarily 100% wet, but it's even damp. Paper, fabrics, anything organic, that's where you'll find mold. It starts growing. Mildew, on the other hand, it has a flat growth. So it remains on the surface, and it can easily be removed. And a perfect example I'll give everybody is the bathtubs and the tile in the bathtub. A lot of times, right in the corners, you'll see that little black, just very wet, black mildew, and technically it's mold. It is mold, and it's fungus. It's just sitting in there. But those are normally a little bit easier to wipe off. So. Is there really a difference between both of them? The only difference is the way they grow, but they both need to be taken care in the same way. They're both fungi, and they both are dangerous if there is a problem. This is the example, right? Is this a mold mildew? Most likely this is mildew, right? You see it in the tiles. Sometimes you pass a wet rag or something, and it comes off really easily. This one, another one on the tile. This is very common. It's outside. We see it, the discoloration, but it's a mold or mildew. Most likely this is mildew. You get a little hose or wash it off, and it normally goes away. Again, the way it grows on the leaves, right? This mold or mildew. This is most likely mold. It will definitely eat out the whole leaf out. And another picture. This one here is a mold or mildew. Definitely mold for sure. It was a leak from the second floor to the first floor. Inside the wall, this is one of the most common pictures that we see around. The black mold. Everybody, we see it as a black mold. And right, this mold or mildew is inside the wall cavity. It's in the drywall. It's in the structure. This is definitely mold. One more picture, things that we can see. This one here in the bottom, you can see that inside the wall there's mold growing there. And this one's a perfect picture. The outside, you can see the paint. It looks really good. The baseboard, you see a little bit of the baseboard there. But once we did an inspection inside, you can see the bottom there of the mirror. There's mold growing. Again, sometimes what is outside, a whole nother thing is inside the wall. So everything we do normally when it's doing inspections is, with first question we ask, was there a water damage? And most likely in this case, there was definitely water damage that wasn't taken care of. This is behind the cabinet. We removed the cabinet out, and inside the wall, you can see how bad it was, and there's insulation as well. That was pretty damaged. So the outside could look perfectly fine, or maybe a couple of patches, but inside is definitely a bigger issue. Jump a little bit with the simple facts of mold. Again, this is something that it's natural in the environment. It's just everywhere. It's been with us for 45 million or more. I mean, this is crazy, but at least 45 million buildings in the United States have unhealthy levels of mold, and this was brought up by from 2017. It's 45 million buildings in the United States have been unhealthy with levels of mold. That is quite a big number. There are molds that can grow on wood, paper, carpet, foods, and insulation. So there's different kinds of mold. Each year, mold destroys more wood than all the fires or termites combined. And that was brought up by 2016 by Luke Armstrong. So imagine that. It's again, I don't think we give the importance of mold, how bad it could be. Most doctors do not have the training to identify mold illness, right? You go to the doctor, they'll ask you a couple of questions, and some people could be allergic, some people have some problems, but in reality, because most doctors do not have any kind of training or how to identify any kind of mold illness. So possibly every doctor in the United States is treating mold illness, and they just don't realize it. Again, this little facts they came out from a little while ago, so I'm sure they have changed, and there's probably more now. There's no practical way to eliminate. Jeff said it. You can use many different things, but there's really no way to eliminate mold or mold spores in the indoor environment. The way to control indoor is to control moisture. Again, if there is no water, there's no mold. So mold will grow regardless if it's a previous growth in the building. This is where I said if it was dead or alive. When we call it dead, is it was growing, it dried out by itself, but the molds are still there. If you put water in there, it's 100% that it will come back again. Another one is mold is, again, this is dead or alive, and most it won't go away. It won't go away. The best way to do it is to treat it as far as, let's in this example, drywall. If it's a big deal, you have to discard the drywall, and I give you some tips before on how to do that as well. And mold is not always a health threat. That's always a question that we get. How bad is mold? Am I gonna die? You know, we get calls where tenants calls us and say, "Hey, I found mold in my closet, and then this is really bad, and I'm feeling really sick, and I'm coughing. I think I'm going to die." It's not always the case. A couple of more pictures. This one here, definitely again, mold growing in the bottom. You can see there was a lot of moisture inside. Walls look perfectly fine sometimes in the outside, but this is inside. There's different kinds of mold. This one, you can see the colors, different kind of colors out there. It's not only black. This one's the green one. You can get a little kind of bluish, browns. We've seen browns, whites. So there's all these different kinds of mold. And again, not all of them are pretty harmful, but it is bad for the structure. It is bad for your property. So this one here is another picture here. You can see there's probably 4 or 5 different type of mold growing in the wall. I think that's just fascinating seeing those things grow. Testing. Another thing we get a lot is when is the right time to test? Do I have to test for mold? Do I have to do it? Again, we go back where there's really no regulations on it, but there's a different systems that they do. And how to get basically how to test for this. The very first one is normally they have to assess the conditions to prevent the loss of area. So there's got to be an assessment. There has to be what is the loss, what happened, right? They have to determine which areas are unaffected. Is it all the structure? Is it some part of the structure? We have to determine if there's adjacent areas that have excessive amount of settle spores. Condition 2, we look into where Again, there was probably mold in the drapes, in the clothing, and you get all the mold out. You kind of went through the living room, you went through the kitchen. How excessive is it, and where did it land? We had to determine a more accurate scope of work. So this is really the reasons why you had to test. There's different things, but you had to determine how bad is it. Is it something you really need to look into? And the biggest one that we look into is you have to how can we protect the contractor against a cross contamination allegation or limited liability. This is a big one. A lot of companies will do a mold remediation, but they don't take the steps to handle it. And instead of creating a healthier environment, they created more of a problem eventually in the future. So there's really no standards. There's really no limit of values on the concentration of mold spores. They haven't been set. Okay, so again, there's really no regulations, but there is a lot of testing that are normally they go based on the outdoor environment, the condition 1 environment, with the inside environment. So in this case, if perfect testing, if the living room environment or the concentration of mold is very low compared to a bedroom, there's a problem there. So that's something where we need to look into. So there's no EPA regulations, and there's no standards on airborne mold growth anywhere. But this is why sampling is needed for mold. Okay, in most cases, if it's visible, there's really no sampling necessary. Do you really have to do sampling? You really don't have to. But in such cases, especially as a property owners, this is something that we've seen a lot is lawsuits. Tenants going to the landlord and put a lawsuit on it. So sampling is needed in order for you to make sure that in case there's any kind of litigations involved, all right, you know where the source came from, you know what happened, make sure that everything's clear. Any health concerns or problems are being taken care of by that sampling, and you're also just considered to get the evaluation for the site. These documents or this sampling will give you that information. So in case it goes into litigation issue, you're protected. So sampling, we recommend that all the time on those cases where that the tenant is already telling you, I'm feeling sick. This is going on with me already. You need to do something about it, or I'm gonna call my lawyer. These are definitely times when you have to take that phone call and start getting a sampling done to make sure that you get the evaluation correctly for that site. And again, if you go to court, it's proof. So again, the surface sampling may be also useful to determine, what areas have been adequately cleaned or remediated. This is something that as a property owner, if you have those tests and you hire us to come and do the work, and we turn in a place that there's really no difference on it, you can hold us and say, hey, this is the way you're supposed to clean it. What happened? So it gives you it will give you pretty much making sure that remediator is doing the right work. And the sampling should be done only before or after developing the plan of structures to make sure that the suspected mold sources and route are exposed and make sure they're being taken care of. And then to figure out what you think is happening and how to prevent disapprove it before the sampling. So make sure that the sampling is being taken care of. Make sure that you get make sure you understand how to read the sampling, and the company that you could hire, they will give you those answers. Post-verification, this is once the remediator has done their work. Okay, we call it as a clearance testing. This is very important for you to get that test. Even if you don't do the sampling or the testing before, the clearance test, it's something that, again, if you're in litigation, you want to show proof that whatever problem was taken care of. You need that document. And also it verifies us that as a restorer, we've done our work. Okay, so make sure that it was effective. Make sure that job that we completed was effective by giving you a clearance test. It provides the risk assessments there for the occupancy. So again, it tells them, hey, this is what happened. Liability protection, this is a big one. You have to protect yourself. Make sure you get that the clearance test. It provides the documents. Again, the job is completed. You don't have to do this. This is something, again, there's no regulations. Really don't have to be. There's no mandatory for you to do the test. But we highly recommend this 100% because once we leave the job site, any remediator leaves the job site, it really comes down to square one. Okay, there can be a jeopardy for being mold growth later on during the years, but at least you want to make sure that you get something done, and also that it just um, I guess the peace of mind mainly, the peace of mind for you as an owner of the property, and it definitely will help you a lot. Um, and this is what they're looking for into the criteria of what, how do you know, or how we know is being, there's a clearance on it. Again, they compare the air to the non-problem building, making sure that the air samplings are matching or they're pretty close to be the same. What are the target organisms, right? So what was it really tested? What was it really done? And the type of concentration level should be similar to the lower of the local outdoor air. Those are things that they look into the criteria. So again, very high numbers in the bedroom, low numbers in the living room. We want to compare those, and we want to make sure that by the time it gets done, both levels are similar. Okay. There's also swab surface sampling, and that also determines the concentration of the mold spores. But this is the criteria that they will look into when it comes into the having an effective mold remediation. Um, Topic that I want to touch is on the health effects. Again, is it really in general? The health effects depends on the exposure. Okay, how much mold have you been breathing, especially in a home, and definitely this is a big one. Individual in the immune response, sensitivity from every person. It's something that we gotta look into. So it could definitely cause problems. Okay, dead or alive. And again, mold, dead or alive, can still, if it's a dry mold and you breathe that, you're inhaling it or you're touching it, some individuals could have some reactions, right? The most common ones are obviously respiratory problems. Okay, the coughing, the breathing, those are definitely one of the issues. Every individual's response is different. Okay, allergies, it's almost like allergies, asthma. Rhinitis and sinusitis is one of the things that is very most common in the infections. Immune system stressor. So obviously your body feels weird, body feels different. Less common is the skin problems. Some people have a rash or when they touch it, they have a reaction in their skin, and that normally just very simple to take care of. But again, asthma is probably one of the biggest ones that we've seen, and it all depends on the sensitivity. Most of them, again, here's a slide. Mold can trigger asthma episodes. Okay, sensitive individuals, we look into those that are compromised with immune system. Again, we learned that over these past 2 years. Anyone that has a chronic disease, anyone that is a child, anyone that their immune system is not, up to a good standard. So all these exposures could happen to them, but asthma is definitely can trigger some problems. And 21.8 million people reported to have asthma in the U.S., and approximately 4.6 million cases are estimated to be attributed to dampness and mold exposure in the home. So again, this is a serious case. It might not be something that is of an issue now if you're being exposed to it, but down the line it could have some effects on it that it may be unforeseen. So it has to be taken care of. Definitely, the asthma and mold goes together. Again, we'll reach out a couple of exposures when it comes to symptoms, right? The shortness of breath. We had a lot of calls. I'll give you an example. A lot of calls these past 2 years. People are working from home, and they give us a call, and they say, hey, you know what, this is what I'm feeling: shortness of breath, asthma, coughing, runny nose, headaches, feeling like cold. Eye irritations was one of the biggest ones, and dizziness and nausea. This is like the eye irritation was one of them. Like every time I come home, I go to the store, I feel fine. I come back home, and this is what I feel. They do some testing, and the air, definitely the quality is it's not good. So this is something, because you're working at home, the property may have mold. You're exposed to it in almost on a daily 24-hour basis. You sleep there, you work there, you're more we got cases where they actually have more symptoms on it, and it came out that we did find mold, and we had to remediate it. Once we did that, everything was definitely fine. Um, Aspergillosis. This is an infection disease in the lung. Okay, this is something that it is caused by mold. The fungal infection caused by Aspergillosis fumigatus. Okay, and it's again for immunity compromised individuals. This happens. They trace it back, and they found that this is one of the biggest issues. Um, um, Histoplasma, this is another one, or histoplasmosis. This is associated with birds and pigeons and bat droppings. We don't really hide that, but that's also in the southern U.S. There's high humidity climates. Okay, this is also infections of the brain and lungs. Okay, this is something that happens because of certain mold or fungus growing around. This is kind of the cryptococcosis. That's a hard to pronounce. It's associated again with birds and pigeons and bats. So again, they could have these around. They're flying around. They go around, but it mainly does affect the brain in the lesions or lung infections. All these things are definitely health effects. Things that are out there. We don't really hear much, but those are cases that they have found. Infant and young children's lower body weight. They underdeveloped immune systems. Elderly as well, or reduced immune functions. And anyone that has again any kind of um, immunity or disease that can compromise their health when they go through again the mold itself could definitely hurt them as well. When there's a building occupants, okay, make sure you ask the remediator for advice. What health concerns they have in their house, okay, any problems they have, make sure that they contact the physicians. They call us a lot and say, well, is this something that is going to affect my tenant? Is this something that's going to affect the person in the house? Can you tell me what am I supposed to do? They really have to go and they have to see their doctor. It's really hard to say, again, it's not going to be a health threat, but because of what we went through, what we've seen in the previous slides, it has to be taken in a serious way, and they could have some issues. Again, this is I heard about toxic molds. Okay, that grows in building. The toxic mold is supposed to be such a big concern and a very healthy risk for the person in the family. Is that really the case? It is the case if you actually have a house that it has maybe some of the pictures like this. It was in a garage, and it was just pretty bad when it comes to the toxic mold, what we call toxic mold. If cases like this is in your property, you definitely want to take care of that, and it's definitely a risk. So, and not necessarily toxic mold, but this is just mold itself. It can hurt you. This was a water damage itself. You can see the floor. The water sit there for too long, even dry of itself. It dried, but it was a big deal. So toxic is not necessarily a toxic mold, but mold creates mycotoxins. And mycotoxins is the ones that could be definitely poisonous. Okay, so I mean poisonous again. It all depends on the immunity of each person. Okay, so they do create some kind of health problems. What happens is they assume that it's a defense mechanism for the mold. Okay, so even penicillin is something that we use it came from a mold, and it's something we use for our bodies to fight any problems. They are produced under certain conditions. Okay, they're produced actually as by different microfungi. So when it says toxic mold, we hear that a lot. It really is the mycotoxins that the mold is producing. Okay, so if you ingest it or you inhale it, again, if you touch it, these are the problems that you may have, and they are found in the cell walls and the spores of the mold itself, and they're not are not activated by killing the spores. So again, if it's a dried or dead, this is an issue. So that the dead spores can still be allergic. Aspergillus fumigatus, for example, that has been known to infect the lung and immune-compromised individuals, and these individuals inhale the mold spores. They can start growing in their lungs. someone said, I don't believe this. There's cases out there where there's mold been growing inside their lungs, and this is one of the molds, that toxic molds that we were just talking about. Stachybotrys is one of the most common ones that we see, and they can produce more toxins in general, and actually this can actually go into again the lungs itself. So those are big problems that we have. Okay. The key to all this, we're gonna getting close to the end. The keys to all this is definitely moisture control. Okay, when addressing the problems, don't forget to address the moisture. Make sure that it gets dry. Okay, check the humidity or high humidities in the places, in the bedrooms. Any leaks, any maintenance issues, make sure that you check for that. Protect the health and safety of the building. Again, is it property, and the value of the property that you own remain the same. Questions that we got: will you invest in a property of a very high value that is unhealthy? Will you do that? Most people won't buy a house, but in this case, just protect the health and make sure you protect the value of it. Mold will eat through wood. Mold will eat through a lot of the products inside the house, and again, you don't wanna have that. As a remediators, how to clean it. Okay, so first the mold level has to be similar to the inside or out. So that's the number one. That's your goal. You have to set the house or the structure or the place to a pre-loss and sanitary conditions. And last one is, according to the American Conference of the Industrial Hygienists, is that you want to be as effective as possible as your mold remediation project for the ability of people to reoccupy that space. So that is your goal. Your goal, if anybody does this mold remediation in the property, make sure that is again, by testing, the levels are almost equally or similar, and that the place is back to its normal. Process of what we look into when it comes to the inspections and the remediation process. This is what the process looks like. Number one, it starts with the inspection. Hire hygienists. This is the people who will do the testing, the sampling, the air sampling if it's needed. There actually will give you a scope of work as well. The on-site survey is something that we need to look into as well. When you open up in California, asbestos and lead is a big topic. So an on-site survey needs to be done in the walls before you opening them. You hire a professional mold remediation. Whoever does your mold remediation, there's a guidelines that we do follow. Again, there's no regulations for the state. There's none of that, but we do follow some guidelines. And the closest one that the EPA wants us to follow is the schools and commercial buildings. And you can get a copy at the EPA webpage. You can definitely get that. If not, you can give us a call. I'll give you guys also access to that the guidelines. It's a booklet. The next one is the post-remediation inspection. Get the clearance test. Make sure you get the samples. Make sure to get the final report. At the end, if there's any equipment, it gets to remove. And the last one is to build back. Don't build back. Don't put the walls back. Don't do the carpet back if the humidity levels are high, because that you're just enclosing that humidity and mold will grow. So this is a big one. Don't build back until it's dry. Okay. Just a little bit more into it. This is something that you need to create. Obviously, when we do a mold remediation, there's a couple of guidelines we do follow, and you have to set up a containment barriers, 4 to 6 mil plastic when it comes out to it. I'll just give you some examples of what it looks like. This is a containment that we created, and it's just plastic on it to isolate the area and keep the spores once we do the remediation done. Make sure the floors are sealed. We've seen some jobs that they'll do everything right, but the floors itself is not sealed. Make sure they seal them correctly, and then also make sure that it's well established. It's not gonna fall anytime they do if you do, or anyone you know, someone that may do a mold remediation, make sure they do the proper way to do it. They have to manage the airflow. Okay, so make sure that there's enough airflow. Make sure they exhaust anything that goes into um, the containment. Make sure it's being the flow is outside the dirty area. Make sure it's being clean. Um, and other than that, there's actually not all molds are bad. Gonna finish out with this one. One of the best molds out there is blue cheese. Love blue cheese in my salad. So that is actually it is mold, but it's not bad. Okay, so there's a lot. There was a link for this video, and we'll put it into the links below. But you can watch that. There's a lot of good things out there as well that we use. But other than that, we're pretty much all done. I've hopefully got a lot of information out of this and took a lot of notes, and more than happy to reach out to me anytime, and we'll definitely give you guys some answers.
All right. Thank you so much, Freddie. That was great. And yeah, it's a lot of information there. If you've joined us late, if you joined us late, I did want to mention that we have a survey that we are circulating. We sent out an email, I think yesterday, and we already have a lot of respondents. If you're in LA County, but not LA City or Hollywood or Pasadena, then we'd love you to fill out that survey if you have tenants that are impacted, that are claiming financial hardship or COVID, whatever, and you're not getting paid. So we want to definitely get you in the survey, because we plan on having a lawsuit that starts here in like next week. We'll actually probably file that. So definitely get involved if you can. And then also just wanted to mention, in San Francisco, there's a tenant union law that looks like they're definitely going to try to pass this thing in April. And so please be calling your city council, your county supervisor. Definitely we'll have something coordinated to try to prevent that, because that one's just a disaster and really unimaginable. But we're going to keep you, we'll try to keep you informed. And man, there's just so many different things going on. And before we answer the question, and then also last week we had the taxes, a live stream on taxes, so you want to watch that one. And every week there's stuff going on, so definitely want you to subscribe to the AOA News e-newsletter, and you can do that on our website. If you subscribe here on YouTube, there also benefit in that, because whenever we post, you can catch it. And before we get started, I know there's a few questions here. We're going to hear from our sponsor, Livable, another one of the sponsors. And so go ahead and let's roll that one.
Hello there, AOA members. This is Daniel Sharabi, CEO of Livable. We've been partnered with AOA now for some years to bring our ratio utility billing services to membership. And what really sets us apart, aside from quality service and taking great care of your residents and billing them back fairly and accurately for their fair share of utilities, is that we have no minimums. So that means if you've got a duplex or a single family home with an ADU, we're happy to help facilitate the utility bill back on your behalf. So we would love for you to get in touch and join all of these happy customers in using our service and celebrating conservation, but also increasing your net operating income. Livable.com/AOA is where you can find more information and ways to get in touch with us. We look forward to getting some time scheduled and to telling you more about the program and how you can do your part to promote conservation. All the best, and enjoy the live stream.
All right, big thanks to Livable for that. And here we go. We'll go into the questions on YouTube. Kavish, can mold grow on cinder blocks?
The answer is yes. It definitely can. But it's not, again, it's more of a pressure wash. Is something that can be cleaned pretty easily, but it won't be as harmful for the structure. It will remain there even outside rocks and stuff. It will grow, but it's not as damageable for the property as it would be on a wood or drywall.
All right. And Kevin on YouTube, does bleach kill all mold?
That's a pretty good question. It probably could again, it could kill, but it won't eliminate the problem. Your biggest problem will be what is the source of mold growing. A lot of times when people use bleach to kill mold, it will clean it, but it will come back if it's not done properly. And and properly meaning that it could be the assessment inside the wall. Is there what else? What was the source of it, and where is it coming from, and why is it growing? But most likely, it could kill most, but it's not effective. And I think that'll be the answer.
Great. Yeah, when I was living in overseas, there was a big mold problem, and bleach did not work, and it just kept coming back and
Mhm.
coming back and coming back. One thing that I did find, have a friend that has a mold remediation company in Texas, and one of the things that they use is a product called Benefect,
Yeah.
and this product is 100%. It's a what is it? Bio-based disinfectant, so there's no chemicals in it whatsoever. The guy who made it had a child that was immunocompromised, and just anything would have potentially killed the child. So they came up with this. It's based on a thyme oil and thyme oil, whatever, however you say that. And anyway, I used that. Especially when COVID hit, the price of that product skyrocketed because it is effective on everything. It's like 99.99% effective on even AIDS viruses, all types of molds and viruses and things like that. So we were trying to keep people safe here in our office with that. But Benefect, there'll be a link to the Benefect website, where this is just something that I found to be incredibly helpful for us and our family. And killing that stuff, it really is difficult. And I know there's other products that'll kill mold and really deal with the issue. But if you have a recurring issue, you're using bleach and you have a recurring issue, you need to call PRC and just get it taken care of. And for sure. All right, and then here we have our maintenance team disinfects with bleach after resolving moisture issues to permanently eradicate mold effectively. That's Susan. And I'll just keep rolling here with Susan. We had to install bathroom fans to help prevent mold because the tenants unfortunately do not open windows or bathroom doors after showering. Yeah, so you got to take care of the environment and not just treat the mold, right? All right, here's Brian. What safety procedures are used to protect remediator staff? Do remediators wear filters, respirators? If yes, then should tenants be advised to use the same safety procedures until the mold is cleared?
All of our staff, one of them were trained to do the mold remediation, and we follow the steps. But big thing we follow is the PPE guidelines. On the mold remediation, our staff require a full mask, a Tyvek suit, so pretty much you look like they're going out to the moon. But gloves, latex gloves, they do the filters mask is a full face mask with the filters on it. That's what we require. So what we do follow all the guidelines when it comes down to, even as well as when we do a containment, we do a negative pressure inside the containment in order for us to prevent any mold spores just kind of getting in there. We use a chamber, a changing chamber. So we do the containment and then we do the chamber. So once we're working inside of it with a full mask and everything, we come out and we do inside the chamber itself. We undress and then we come out to the living space. So there's definitely guidelines that we follow in the big PPE and obviously any OSHA regulations when it comes down to us as a contractor. But PPE, filters, as far as someone that can do it in some maintenance, they recommend, the EPA recommends at least N95, something N95, and just really comes down to don't get exposed too much when it comes down to, especially if you are having one of your employees doing it. definitely just give us a call and we can assess you on it. And it goes job by job as well. You're more than happy to call me anytime, and again, I think we can put my cell phone in the link. So if anybody else has more details on the specifics, I'll be more than happy to help you guys.
All right. Do professional apartment inspectors on a property sale do mold in the air tests when there is no evidence of mold?
There's sampling on it that is recommended, and they go by it again depending on the situation. A lot of people nowadays, again, if they start feeling sick, if they have some kind of issues, some people will recommend to do an air sampling even if there's no visible mold. It's very again, it's most likely those tests will come positive just for the fact that there is mold growing anywhere. It's as long as who does it and how it's being done, and the comparisons between the outdoor and indoor are adequate. So that'll be my answer. But it's a very, very touchy depending on the inspectors as well.
Right. And how do you make a judgment if the mold is from building defects or moisture from the tenant? If the mold is growing inside the closet or the kitchen, and when opened the wall, there was no mold sign inside the wall. So maybe that's what the comment is here by Mary. So I'll reread this, just the first part. How do I make a judgment if the mold is from building defects or the moisture from the tenant?
The biggest deal is bringing out again, if there has to be some kind of moisture in order for mold to grow. The most common one that we've seen, especially in closets, is they always keep it closed. There's a lot of that bedroom itself or whatever room it is. They may have some kind of the question will come out where I guess I'm going to kind of tone it down a little bit. Find the moisture source. Find where is that water coming in there. If there's a planter inside, the adjacent to the closet, and look and investigate if that's letting water go inside the unit, or is it adjacent to the bathroom and the bathroom might be leaking, or the bathroom might be having too much moisture and that's gonna going into the bedroom. So investigate mainly where is the water source, where is it coming from, and that'll give you a determination if it's a tenant situation or it's actually a defect in the structure. Most of it, if it's a wall adjacent to the bathroom, it is very likely that it could be the bathroom leaking inside the wall, and it's not visible. So I would definitely start with the water source. Where is that water coming from, or humidity in this case?
And there's a comment here that, there are certain tenants out there that are just looking for a lawsuit, and so they're like trying to cultivate the mold. How do you deal with that? Yeah, I'm sure you've thought about it a little bit more than I have. How do you deal with a tenant that's purposely trying to grow mold?
You know what? I did had a conversation with a property manager not too long ago, and they put in their contract that they do regular visits. It is hard as well, but I think they, again, I'm sorry. It really depends on your contract and the kind of tenants they have. But there is people that they will do that high humidity on it. Make sure you document the way you turn in the apartment in this case, how it was. Make sure that, do a walkthrough with them. Make sure that, hey, everything's dry, everything's good, all the plumbing looks good. And then do little random checkups eventually. I believe that's what she was doing. Again, with permission of the tenant and letters, trying to figure out, what needs to be done. But just be ahead of the game in this case, and then turn in something good, document it, show them that it was a dry structure, everything was great, and just kind of follow it as you go. And if you do have a problematic tenant, that's I think everybody might have one, and hopefully there's some legal advice as well on how to handle that. But but definitely turn in something good with documents and say this is how it was when we turn it in.
Great. And one thing that I do want to mention is that there's two sides of the spectrum. You have these people that are really just trying to sue you, and then you have people that genuinely have an issue. And it's what's interesting is that it's really hard to to know who's actually going to have a problem with mold. And so you could ask the question, well, how is it that this person is debilitated by this? It's like kryptonite for Superman, where another person, we just had other tenants that lived in there and they never had a problem. And one thing I know is that there's, if someone has a total body overload, they have multiple things going on within them, multiple toxicities from different things, and if their liver's not performing well to be able to get rid of it, it can be like the straw that breaks the camel's back. And so you don't want to just assume that they're just trying to have a lawsuit. Some people, it really is genuine, and there's a systemic mold toxicity that they're dealing with. And I've seen people, I saw one lady that was that way, and she was able to get a whole lot better. And so it's just an interesting journey for some people with that, for sure. And here we'll go on to the next question on Facebook. Ruth, any recommendations for sampling for testing companies, the companies that will test the mold?
There is a few. We use 4 different hygienists in our book. We're more than happy to give you their information. But definitely mold testing companies, look for a hygienist that has at least a good background certification. Definitely there's a few certifications they go through, hygienists. But I'll be more than happy to give you a couple of them. One of them, Dave Gold, is one of the companies we've used, and he's really good at investigating and looking at a couple of things. We work all in Southern California, so depending on the area, we use hygienists closest to that area. But Dave Gold seems to be one of the persons that we've gone to for the past years. But look in your area, definitely look for a hygienist and test. Find that person that has some kind of certifications behind them and experience on mold. That would be my best recommendation. But I'll definitely give also my email. You're more than happy to email me, and I'll give you that information to you directly, and you can look into pricing. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I have we forgot to mention it, but what I know that you have a special deal for people who are AOA members. Can you share what that is?
Yeah, so any members from the AOA, any mold remediation project that you may have, we actually giving you guys 20% off. Make sure that when you call us, let us know that you heard from us in the AOA, and that way you can get your 20%. We look into the projects as well, and we give free assessments, obviously, for any members from the AOA. So if you do have an issue, I'm more than happy to come out there for free at no charge. But if we start a project with you, we'll give you that 20% off.
It's awesome. All right. Your AOA membership pays, huh? All right. Tyler on YouTube. If we pressure wash exterior cinder block, can a product be used to create a moisture barrier?
Yeah, definitely. If it's an outside exterior wall, there's one. This is more of a paint out there that I've seen lately is made of polyethylene, and a lot of new homes are using this new product, and it's more like a paint, and it just goes like a little rubber film that they put into the paint itself. So it's I think it has polyethylene on it, and it's gray barrier on the outside. Look into for that as well. On some paints nowadays, they do have a lot more water resistant in there. I can't call the name of the product. I'll look into the product for it, but that polyethylene paint, I was very impressed with it. It was really, really nice, and the product looked really good in the house. But there's quite a bit of products you can definitely use for moisture barriers in the outside.
All right, Ray on YouTube. Will this work? First, apply a mixture of bleach, 80% plus water. Then after it dries, apply with Zinsser Mold Killer Primer. Then apply with finish paint. Would that be something that would be effective, you think?
It's Again, it could be effective. Very hard to say. I will actually, instead of bleach, Jeff, I'm with you on the benefit. Decon 30 is the one we use. I think instead of bleach, anybody that you should go away from bleach and use at least Decon 30 or benefit products. That's always the best one. And then remember, the biggest deal I think to be effective on any kind of mold situation is the moisture barrier. What can you use to avoid any moisture? Um, I think that's the best way of process. So look into whatever materials product it is. Definitely clean it with Benefect. I think that's a great agent. And then use something. How can you prevent that the moisture from being in that particular material? And that should be very effective on it, removing that moisture.
Yeah. Yeah, literally we moved into a place that was abandoned for like it, I don't know, 10 years or something, and then renovated it and moved in, and it was like you could still smell the mold. So we used it still just had that musty smell, and
The
so we
musty
used that
smell.
Benefect, and it really was good. It was remediated, but yet we made extra sure because man, your health is everything, and your health is everything for your tenants too. They have to make money to be able to pay the rent. So we all have the same goal of keeping everybody healthy. All right, if you have okay, yeah. So Harvey on YouTube, have you found mildew on particle board shelves in a medicine cabinet? Is particle board to be avoided in bathrooms?
I personally think it should be.
Yeah.
Just the fact that the particle boards, um, they attract humidity. So normally they and on a real wood, for example, right? On real wood, it can hold 20% humidity. But on particle board, you pretty much have it's just. I definitely go away from it. I think on a bathroom for the moisture side of it, you should. Um, we see that a lot in the bottoms, and if you have experience with it on any kind of cabinet that is made of particle boards, on the bottom if there's moisture, you'll start seeing bubbling it. In most cases it's because it absorbs moisture more than actual real wood. So definitely I think it's stay away from the from the particle board, just material in general.
All right, we have just a couple more questions here. If the moisture appears to be coming from sprinklers for new trees on a renovation next door, and we have significant mold issue in rental, how do you suggest we approach neighbors?
Oh, it's always a touchy subject with the neighbors. Um, I think we had a scenario where they had that issue, and we found it on there's a condominium, and I think it's that they're bringing us into to your property and kind of looking an assessment, and we're more than happy to kind of address that issue with them. That way, you're not a direct contact with your neighbor. You don't want to have a bad relationship with your neighbor, but that way we can also say, hey, you know what, looks like this is where it's coming from, and look for a solution. A lot of times, what we do sometimes is reducing the water on that side of the sprinkler side, or even helping to change those sprinklers to be more of the direct one side than just spraying everywhere. The sprinklers are pretty cheap nowadays. You can even help maybe doing the cost of coming to somewhere in the middle where you can help and say, hey, I'll help you with this, you help me with that. But in this case, that experience that we had, they brought us in as an experts, and we went and talked to the neighbors and say, hey, this is the issue, this is what I think we recommend for both parties, and that worked very well. I think that was a good mediator on our side.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely use us for that if you can.
Awesome. And last question here from Ernest. Is there a treatment for mold that will eliminate it from an apartment?
I wish there was. It would be very, best easy way. But as a restorer, the very first thing we do is, in order for us to eliminate 100% the issue of mold in a material, is to remove it. That is the only way. And the second one I'll keep mentioning a lot is the low levels of moisture. That's the biggest one, and I think that's the hardest just in general. But there's really not something that I can say, hey, this is the way you need to do in order to prevent it. Mold is just it's fascinating, the world of mold out there, I gotta say. But definitely just very low moistures of humidity, and remove any affected area, and don't disturb that so go at older areas as well. Um, wow, that's a good one. That's a good question. It's
And then just one last question that I had is when do you have to do the testing? Like you have an issue. Um, is there a time when you don't have to do the testing?
that one, the California is a lot more tougher in that regulation. There's rule 1403 from AQMD, which is they oversee the asbestos. Pretty much any building material that needs to be disturbed has to be tested. Obviously, newer products itself, there's it could be avoidable if there's a new renovation, but just went to a training on AQMD, and they're still finding products here in the United States that contains asbestos. So that's why the rule is going to come up with. But technically, we recommend is really job to job basis. Call us out and see we can help you on determining that decision. But as far as regulations goes, almost anything that is disturbed needs to be tested for lead and asbestos in California. And every county, every city also has their own regulations. So we have to look into that as well.
Here's a really good question, and probably be the last question we have. But can white mold be effectively removed from furniture, or should it be thrown away?
No, it can definitely be restored or whatever. Obviously, furniture could be restored. It has to be done properly though, and you have to look into the material. How long was that material exposed to mold? There's one thing that we look into when we do an assessment is, and we consider that a surface mold. If the mold itself is just kind of laying on top, and it's so funny the way sometimes you can see things, but on a couch, for example, if you only see it, it's just kind of in there. But the best treatment for that is a good wash, or you can call a company to come do a good cleaning on it. But most textiles, it could be restored. And again, depends a lot on how long has that mold been sitting on it, because mold will eat through the clothing. But again, that's most cases we have restored a lot of the contents itself in the property. So couches is I think one of the biggest ones. Mattresses, I will consider that almost a thrown away item on a mattress, just because you sleep on 8 hours a night. So I would consider that depending how much has been exposed. But other than that, I think everything, most products could be restored by a good dry cleaning or a good wash.
Great. And then Ralph has a great question here. Is there a safe way to dispose of molded items like drywall or boxes?
The best way to do it is bag it very well. We use 6 mil bags. Those are very heavy duty bags, and normally we put them in there, tie them very well with tape. And there's no regulations on disposal of mold. It's considered more of a organic situation, but just bag it very well. Just bag it and just throw in your trash can. In comparison, again, with lead and asbestos, that's something that you can't do. You can't just throw asbestos product materials into a trash can. That's a big fine and against a regulation. But mold, definitely bag it very well, throw it away. It should be fine.
Great. Do you know of a good mold remediation company in Northern California, San Francisco area?
I have to dig in my contacts. We are part of a big network for in remediation. If you send me an email, I'll be more than happy to give you our contact up there in that area. Trying to think of a few names, but yeah, just send me an email. I'll send you a very good contact up there.
Great. All right. Well, we're about to wrap up here. Any parting words for us, Freddy?
I don't know. Everything's great, no? All I gotta say is just, I appreciate the invite. Thank you very much. Any questions, again, there's my information's in the video. Send me an email. More than happy, again, for any AOA to give any kind of assessment and free assessments, and that 20% just go ahead and take advantage of that. The AOAs is a great place to be, and we're more than happy to be part of it. So I appreciate everybody. Thank you very much for the time.
Great. Yeah. And so if you're thankful for Eddie, you're happy with what he shared today, you got something out of this, give it a like, and maybe YouTube will push it out there a little further for other housing providers to see it and maybe stay out of trouble and and be able to come up with a game plan to take care of their tenants better. Yeah. And then next week we'll be back with again, how to beat the capital gains tax when you're trying to sell your property. And, so definitely stay tuned for that one. And again, thanks for joining. We'll see you next week.